The City of Johannesburg has confirmed that methane gas led to an underground blast which damaged Lillian Ngoyi Street near the Bree Taxi Rank.
One person died and over 40 others were injured in last month's incident. Officials say 4 million rand was spent to close off the area for investigation.
The city has also revealed that it will cost at least 178 million rand to repair the damaged infrastructure in the area.
The type of the gas that has fueled the explosion is methane. We can say it with certainty, it's methane. You would know that methane is lighter than air, so usually methane will then basically rise. It will then go up. It traveled up all along the service tunnel from an unknown source to the crest of the tunnel near the Van Branders Street. Why did we not see any fire? And they will also explain, if you look at the low explosive level, there's a threshold of between 5 to 15%. If it's between 5 to 15%, it will be an explosion. Anything above 15% will then create a fire. So if it is above 15%, you'll get a fire, and then it will move down into the threshold of 5 to 15%, and then you'll get an explosion. So this one was particularly between the threshold of 5 to 15%.
For more on that story, we're joined by Toxicologist Dr. Gerhard Verdoorn. Dr. Verdoorn, good evening to you. Thanks for your time. So the city then saying unequivocally it was methane gas behind that explosion. What are the scenarios that we're looking at here in terms of what led to this explosion, especially around this gas? Because the immediate concern then is what needed to have been done to try and prevent that explosion.
Well, there are a couple of possible scenarios. We know for a fact that it couldn't have been the current pipes that supply the gas to people in the homes from the municipality or from Sasol, and there was strong allegation that there was a very old gas pipe that came from the gas factory in Auckland Park. But having looked at the scenario, there is also a possibility that it might have been simply natural gas that built up in the environment down there. Because remember, in the clay layers and the sediments below the Johannesburg city, there are sediments in there, and there are some organic materials there that would, in the anoxic conditions, have reduced to become methane gas. And then as methane gas builds up over time, it starts mixing with oxygen until it gets to the critical point, and one little movement of one rock to cause a little spark or a flash is enough to ignite it. So those are the two possible scenarios. So I'm not sure whether the production of natural gas from the fermentation and reduction of the sediments and stuff would have caused it. It seems more like there was a leak from a pipe, because it must have been quite a big volume of gas that built up over time and got to that critical mixture between the oxygen or the air and the gas that caused the explosion. And thinking about the most recent events, where there are a couple of mild tremors in Johannesburg, remember when the ground starts shaking, there is friction between certain layers in the surface of or underground, the surface of the soil, and two little rocks or two little stones, like for example, quartzite, that would abrased each other, they would have caused a spark, and that caused that massive explosion.
If we talk about preventative measures, Dr. Verdoorn, at this point, are there steps that can be taken to prevent future explosions of this nature, or is it simply left up to the elements?
No, I think there are very simple engineering things that can be done. And I still believe that the engineers in the country have the ability, even at municipal level, to do the right things. So in other words, if they fix up that area and there are possibly old pipes in the area, they will always run in some form of a conduit. And what needs to be done there is then to put the ventilation valves into the conduit. In other words, there's like a valve coming up on the surface of the road, wherever, and then that will be covered by grit. So if there's any gas leak, the gas will leak out and will be diluted to the point where it will not really be combustible, at least not be explosive. At worst, then, if the gas is sitting at something like, let's say, 0.5% to 1%, the gas might ignite, it might burn with a very faint little blue flame that you often see over a swamp and so on. or like in a gas stove, but it won't actually explode like we saw out there. So I think with a couple of very simple engineering interventions, it's possible to prevent a catastrophe like this in the future. And I do not know what the pipes look like, which they use currently for the Joburg Metro to supply gas to people for cooking and for heating. But I'm quite sure that somewhere in the system there will be these pressure release valves in case there's a buildup of, or an excessive pressure buildup that will release the excessive gas. So these are the things that can be done with a simple intervention. So there's not much more than one can do about that. Even if there's a possibility of real natural gas developing under the road surface, if they put in a couple of pipes with which are perforated, and then they expose them to the soil with a cover, the gas can escape, and the gas can at worst then ignite, but it won't explode.
The city is talking about the use of technology to also help detect what's happening underground with its infrastructure. They've mentioned the need for sensors that could also be used here. In your view, would that also be a viable intervention method?
Yeah, remember, long before you get to any catastrophic development like the explosion we saw there, if they install the proper measuring equipment like sensors that can detect when there's a gas buildup or a gas leak, that will alert the city engineering department that there's a gas leak somewhere, and they can intervene. They can shut off the main valve that supplies the main line with the gas, and they can go to that particular spot where the detector will pick up the gas, and they can relieve the pressure from that area and release the gas up into the atmosphere. Now, that's not the best thing in the world to do, because we know that methane is a greenhouse gas, but that is about the safest thing to do, because first of all, you have to think about the safety of people, and then secondly about environmental safety. But with proper technology, these things exist all over the world. If you think about the coal mining industry, the gold mining industry, all the mines are plagued to a greater or less extent by gas building up, especially in gold mines where there's always a grave danger of methane gas building up. And back in the old days, they used to take a canary down, and the canary would tell them, right now there's suffocation because of methane or carbon dioxide. In the more modern times, they use like a little gas lamp or a little lamp with a candle to see if the candle became more brighter. But with new technology, there are all sorts of gas detectors that can measure different types of gases, give you the quantification or the concentration in the air, and that can be done as a precautionary measure. And if they then see there is a buildup of gas because of something happening, like a pipe being compromised or a pipe leaking, they can go out there, shut the pipe off, and release the gas and make sure there's no catastrophic explosion.
Dr. Verdoorn, thanks for your time. We'll leave it there for tonight.